All right, we want to look at the inventory worksheet. We are going to be looking at this perpetual side of it, which is page 2 of the worksheet. This one's a little bit more difficult than doing the periodic system because we have to keep track of when an item was sold. Under that periodic system, we didn't have to look at when the item was sold. We just have to look at what was sold for that particular month. In perpetual, we have to know when it was sold because we then have to know when was the last units that were purchased or when the first units purchased and all that type of information. Now remember, I did say that for LIFO and FIFO, for not LIFO and FIFO, but for just FIFO, the periodic numbers should match what we have for the perpetual numbers. So what we're going to look at is on the worksheet. The top of the worksheet is going to look like what I'm showing you right here. So it has the Januaries and the beginning inventory for January, all of our purchases, and everything that we've sold. You'll notice I do have colored dots beside everything. That is just to signify those amounts so that you'll be able to see it a little bit clearer when I do the video. I'm going to try to stick with those colors for those particular units so you can see where everything is coming from with the pluses and minuses and all of that. One of the things I want you to realize is that when we look at this information, it tells us how much we sold the units for. This is not important when we're looking at LIFO and FIFO costing, all right? This is only important for the sales journal entry. So our journal entry for the sales is where that $30 would come in. This has nothing to do with the cost of these. Those are the selling prices, so you will not be using those $30 in actually figuring out the cost in FIFO and LIFO. So you want to make sure that if you have something that has those amounts on it, you just ignore that selling price for the LIFO and FIFO calculations. You will use those for the sales entry for the journal entries, but that's it. You will not use them for the LIFO, FIFO calculations. So just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that up front. Now what you want to do, we're going to look at FIFO first, and you want to set up a chart, and you're going to do this for FIFO and LIFO. The first part of the chart should have the date that the transaction occurred in. Your purchase transactions would come first. Now purchase transactions are going to be added to your inventory. Then you will have those items sold, and the items that you sell will be subtracted from your inventory. I have it set up with our beginning inventory. So January 1st, we had 100 units at $10 is what we actually had. Then we get to January 6th, and January 5th, and on January 5th, we actually have a purchase. And we are going to have a purchase of 500 units at $11. So what that's going to give us, that's going to be added to our other inventory. So what we will have is we're going to have 100 units at $10. That was our beginning inventory. We are going to add to that these 500 units at $11. Now that is our inventory as of January the 5th. Then we get to January the 6th. And on January the 6th, we are going to sell 300 units. Now, which 300 units are we going to sell? Well, this is FIFO. So we will come and we will look at the first units that we got in first. So we will be selling 100 of these red units, $10 units. And then what do we still have left? Well, we still need to sell 200 units, right? So we will be doing 200 at 11. So what that leaves us is in inventory. We had 100 units. We sold 100 units. So they're gone. We had 500 at 11. We sold 200. So that's going to leave us with 300 at 11 is what we're going to have there. And so now what we are going to look at is that next time period. And the next time period is January the 10th. So on January the 10th, we are going to purchase 200 units at $12. And so what we'll have in our ending inventory is we will have the 300 units that we had at 11, and then we're going to have the 200 units at 12. Now we want to make sure that we keep all of these units in order, because if we do not keep them in order, we can get into some trouble. Because remember, we're selling our first units first, so our first units that we purchased always need to be at the top, and then the other units then need to move down. We get to January the 15th, and on January the 15th, we are going to make another purchase, and this purchase is going to be 100 units at $13. So then what I'm going to have in inventory is I have my 300 units at 11. I would then have my 200 units at 12. And then now I have this 100 units at 13. I then moved to January the 18th. And then on January the 18th, what I'm going to have is I'm going to sell 500 units. So here is 500 units. I have to break those out. So the first units that I'm going to sell are those 300 green units. So I'm going to come in, and I've got 300. I have 300 units at 11. And then I still need 200 more, because 500 minus 300 leaves me with 200. Well, the second units that I'm going to look at are going to be those aqua units. So I have 200 at 12. And that is going to leave me with ending inventory of only 100 units at 13. So I would come in here, and I'm going to change pages for the next one. And so I'm going to January the 22nd. So I put the date, January the 22nd. Remember, I have a purchase column, I have a sales column, and then I have an inventory column. So for January the 22nd, I'm making a purchase of 300 at 14. So after that purchase, remember, my purchases get added, my sales get subtracted. So what I'm going to have is I still have that 100 units at 13. Those did not go away. See, I had an ending inventory of 100 at 13. So those get moved over. And then I'm going to have this 300 at 14. And draw my line. I then get to January the 25th. And on January the 25th, I'm going to sell 200 units. Now the units I'm going to sell, I have to sell the ones on top, those first units first. And so that's going to be the 100 at 13. Then I've got 100 more I need to sell because 200 minus 100 is 100 at 14. I have 300 units here in inventory minus the 100 I just sold. So that means I'm going to be left with those black units of 200 at 14. And then I get to that last transaction on January the 30th. And for that very last transaction, what I'm going to be looking at here is a purchase. And I'm purchasing 100 units at 15. And so what I will have in this ending inventory is I will have 200 units at 14, and I will have 100 units at 15. So when I come through and I look at these, this amount right here is going to give me $2,800, and then I will have $1,500 here, and that will give me a total of $4,300 is what I would have in ending inventory. So that is my ending inventory number. I just take what I have at the very end. Now, in figuring out my cost of goods sold, what I have to do is I have to start here with these units, and I have to total up what I actually have. So I would take the 300 units that I sold. I have 100 at 10, 200 at 11. Well, for this particular one, what that's given me is $1,000 there. It gives me 2,200. So if I was actually doing a journal entry here, then my cost of goods sold for this particular entry would be at the $3,200. The January 18th, what I'm looking at there, and I'm just going to, I'm putting that down here. I'm going to move this up here just so we can see the totals. We're looking at 3,300, and that was taken the 300 times 11. Then we would take the 200 times 12, and that would give me 2,400. And then if I move over to this particular section, I have, I'm going to push these numbers up. 100 times 13 would be 1,300. And then I would take the 100 times 14, which would be 1,400. And so what I'm going to do is all of these totals that I have here, I'm going to take and add all of those up. So in essence, what I'm doing is I'm taking anything in that sold column. So in this case, it starts with 1,000 plus that 2,200 plus 3,300 plus 2,400 plus 1,300 plus that 1,400, and that is going to equal $11,600. And so that is my cost of goods sold. Now you notice here, if I take and add these two numbers together, I get that $15,900, which was that total cost. If you remember back to the periodic one, we used pretty much the same numbers for both of these. What you'll find is that is going to be that total cost of $15,900. That would be where we added up all of our beginning inventory plus anything that we purchased for the year is what those two should be. The other thing I want you to look at, if you go back to the worksheets, you'll find that for this one, it being FIFO, the periodic numbers did equal what we have for these perpetual numbers. Now for FIFO, that's the only one that does this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the video right here with the FIFO, and I'm going to do another video on LIFO because this one's getting kind of long, and I want to kind of break it up so you can do it in different segments. So the next video, like I said, will be on our LIFO costing.